Well, welcome to our Media City program. I'm Liz Homer, I'm the curator here, and tonight we're going to have a program on summertime in the city in Lansing and talk about some of the changes that have occurred over the years in our parks and recreation programs and the kinds of things that we do. But before we do, I want to mention a couple of things that are coming up at the Turner Dodge House in the next few months. In fact, in May we're having a Mother's Day program, which will include a vintage fashion show. And I know it's going to be lots of fun. And then on Father's Day, we're going to have a magician that comes to the tables. And that will be, and his name is Zubik. And he's a local young man. I knew him when he was in high school, and now he's a magician. And I think you'll really enjoy him too. And then this summer we'll have our parks, Mary might want to talk about the parks program because it's a wonderful concert in the parks program we have in the summer, and one of the programs on June 23rd will be here at the Turner Dodge House, and that's where you bring a chair and you just come and sit out on the lawn, and the friends will serve you a picnic lunch if you like, and it's lots of fun. But Mary is going to tell you about not only the history of the Parks and Rec, but also her own memories, because she's from Lansing and has been part of the Parks and Rec for a long time, and the Parks and Rec department for some 22 years.
As I said, right now we have 22 employees in the Leisure Services Division. Back in its heyday, we had close to 30 positions. We acquired, I'll get into the community centers first, because that was a big visible area that in Parks and Recreation that had quite a bit of changes. In 1975, Geyer Center was built just in the north end, and Kingsley, which is now Letts Center, was under construction at that time. And they opened in 1975, and that took some of the staff and kind of spread them out, and that was basically the beginning of our decentralization. We have we've got 4 different community centers right now, but Geyer was the first one to open with the professional staff. And before Geyer Center was there, we had drop-in centers, and they were located in small little brick buildings. There's one right now in Foster Park that the food movers use. That was the East Side Neighborhood Center, East Side Community Center, and we ran programs basically after school on the weekends there. And it was just basically drop-in. It was just a little brick building, probably not much bigger than this area right here. And the staff was there, and they worked with the kids playing games and activities and arts and crafts and different things. West Side Community Center was right near the corner of Butler and Kalamazoo. And North Side Center was right in Oak Park. And that building is still there, been renovated by the neighborhood organization. But at that time the move was on to do a full-service center. So they created the Geyer Center and the Kingsley Center, closing those neighborhood facilities and getting a full-service, more of a community approach to larger services and more services that could happen at those facilities. And those centers employed 4 people. They had a center supervisor, an assistant supervisor, they had a program leader, they had a custodian, they had a full-time secretary. And that continued for about 10 years at the centers. They continued under that sort of setup, running different programs. And it's interesting when I look back on it over the years, they didn't run classes, they ran programs. They ran drop-in programs, they ran Easter egg hunts, they ran a lot of different I would say low organized activities for people in some community meetings that they had. And about 1980, probably about in the late 80s, we put together programming teams. We took someone out of the sports section, someone out of the community activities section, someone out of the cultural arts section, and then maybe a center staff, and we had programming teams, and we put together teams of programs and classes. And at that time we did comedy classes, and we did massage, we did exercise classes and different things that cake decorating, and brought those together. So it was very decentralized. The centers weren't responsible for their own programming, but they had just a group of people that got together from the department. So it was kind of different to have that organized that way, but it was very valuable because you got the input of a lot of different people from a lot of different disciplines to put together some programs. And our community centers now have evolved. Foster Center we acquired in 1979. They did a renovation on that. It was the old Foster School. And they did a renovation to bring that building, and make it a community center, build some offices in it, and put that together. And we started programming that fully with the same staff at the other centers in the early 80s. And at that time, pretty much is when the community center section took off. They started doing their own programming. They started more in programming at the centers, and then the sports did the sports, and we kind of took our own little roles on at that time. So it's kind of come full circle from everybody kind of helping out at the centers to pretty much the center staff takes care of the centers and what they do. The sports program has had a huge change also. I grew up in Lansing in the sports program, and I always say that I was born too early. When I graduated from high school, I graduated from Sexton in 1971. We had just started playing a game from Sexton against the girls from Eastern and against the girls from Everett, but it was done in our little one-piece gym suits, you know, the little button-up jobs there, and there wasn't anything like the uniforms or the crowd or, you know, that kind of a thing. We just started, it was almost like an intramural kind of a thing. So I grew up in the city system. The city had a very highly developed system of basketball for youngsters at the middle school through high school level, and softball and volleyball. So they were responsible for the athletics, basically, that the city had. And over the years, I went to several state tournaments down in Farmington, those kind of things, of state tournaments that were held in the different sports. So it was not school-based driven, it was city-driven, and through the city, the different cities, through our state organization, they had some state tournaments and things. The same with basketball for the boys. It was done at school, at the schools on Saturdays, and for the girls too, on Saturdays. So it wasn't anything that was driven through any of the high schools at all, and so that's quite a difference from where things are today. Fast pitch was huge in Lansing back in the days, and Randy Park was a big facility that ran tons of fast pitch leagues, men's and women's. The Lansing Laurels, that was their home base for a number of years, and they played just an amazing softball game there. I had some classmates that played on the Laurels teams. They were very good players, and they traveled, you know, all around the area to as a part of their league. West Side was very big also. They had lights and scorekeepers and announcements and things, and that's where my home base was, basically, is West Side Park, which is kind of in the area of Oakland, Saginaw, Old Oakland at that time. And there was big happenings at that park too. It was one of the premier parks in the Lansing area. The sports has evolved quite a bit. Today's sports is very different because there's a lot of movement today about through the Youth Sports Institute at Michigan State University and the National Association of National Association of Youth Sports, NAYS, and they like to regulate it somewhat, or to teach coaches, teach parents, and teach professionals how to handle sports programs for the youth, the development of their skill level, and bringing them along through the sport in the proper way, so that it's not just, toss them out there and see what they can do, and see, hopefully you get good parents with, good background behind it that can encourage the kids. But there's a lot of parents' code of ethics nowadays that we never would have thought of back in those days of, of how to properly cheer for your son or daughter, and how to act at different games and those kind of things. So there's a big movement in youth sports now, and that's a very large change that we've seen. The trends there that have changed is that now we're seeing a decrease in the adult sports. With, I think, the influx of the two-parent households that are working, or the one-parent household that the caretaker is also working, things have changed a lot, and the focus is more on the youth sports, and there's less and less adults playing, and there's more and more kids playing sports. So that's been a trend that we've noticed over about the past 10 years, that the decline has come in the adult sports. So that's one kind of a notable thing. Just a very recent trend, and I'm talking the last 2 years, we've noticed that there's just no end to the amount of preschool sports that you can do for kids. I think it goes with the competitiveness of the parents, or maybe if it's, the parents living through their children, but the kids, they want their children to start sports early, and I'm talking 3 years old. And in order to answer that, we've put together some programs. One of them is Little Kickers, which is a soccer program, and the other one is Little Hoopers, that we put together. And its main goal, obviously, is to get the kids involved in a pseudo league type thing. I mean, there's no question that when you watch little Hoopers or little Kickers, that it's just like a bees to honey. I mean, wherever the ball is, you got this little, group that just kind of travels the floor or travels the field and goes all over. But they see on TV, the media, influx of the media, things of the different sports, so the little kids want to play. And if you had a nickel for every gifted child, they just want them to play. They would want them to play in the 6-year-old leagues and the 7-year-old leagues, and I know they're only 4, but they're very good. And so in answer to that, we put them in more age-appropriate kind of situations where our supervisor or the parent that's on the field actually works with the kids, and you don't do the whistles and actually, I don't say chastise them, but, officiate the game, where you just kind of work with them and teach them and, have them spread out and pass the ball and learn their skills and develop the skills. And I think it speaks to the busyness of parents and families too, is that they don't have a chance to, when you think about, do kids play outside in the backyard? I mean, I grew up playing kick the can and hide and seek, and you came in when the streetlights went out. Well, that's not really what people do these days. Kids are not playing in unorganized kind of ways. I mean, they don't just go out, they do somewhat, but not nearly to the extent that they did in years past. So parents who are so busy sign them up for the organized programs. And we went to the football also. We ran a football program for flag football for years in Lansing, and they had pads, helmets, and it was no contact. Well, when you say helmets and pads and you got kids out there, looking like the NFL, they had quite a bit of trouble with the competitiveness and the overzealousness, I should say, of the sport. So about 5 years ago, we scrapped that program and said, it's just not in the best interest of the kids. It's if they want to wear pads and helmets, they need to go to the tackle program. And then 2 years ago, the NFL, through their sponsorship, brought forth a program where they actually took the competitiveness out of the program. They offer, for the fee that you pay, you get the actual NFL jersey, which is very important to the kids. The parents or whoever, whatever, but the kids, what they really want. And so we had an immediate full program. We opened that program to 8, I think we were going with 4 teams in 3 different age groups, and we ended up with 6 and 8 teams in each division. And the important part of that is not to have the officials. When you put the officials in striped shirts on the field, then you change the tone of the game. So the coaches actually do the officiating and run the games, and they run 3 plays this way, and then it's done, and the next team, they go back and forth for 3 plays and do that. So they get the actual learning experience, and that's really the trend nowadays, is to get the learning experience for the kids, that they learn the aspects of the games and actually don't get left in the dust as so many would, when you're talking just strictly competition. So sports has changed a lot. We've, over the years, we started with 3 people in our sports division back when I first came on board. We now have 2, which does not make any sense because the amount of sports and the visibility has just grown leaps and bounds. We register just shy of 1,000 kids in soccer, which, and that's in the spring, and then we have another 800 that come back in the fall. And that's a new sport as to when I was a child. We've grown in that area quite a bit, and so we do a lot of service with that. And with our sports, like our soccer program as an example, we take individual kids whose parents don't have connections of knowing a neighbor that coaches a team, so we'll actually place them on teams and look for coaches ourselves. And then we have some ready-made teams that come in. And it's difficult when ready-made teams come in because you need to be careful about superstars and overloading the teams and tryouts and those kinds of things, and things that basically, in my estimation, don't belong in the Parks and Recreation business. And since taking over as manager, I've continued the thought, and it's a heartfelt thought that I have, is that We need to be the ones who involve the kids in sports and get them rolling and get them skill development and those kinds of things. And if they need to go on to highly organized groups or teams or whatever, those avenues are out there, but it's not our responsibility to be involved in something that involves cuts and tryouts and superstars and things. Because what you find is that you cut a child off a team in 4th or 5th grade, that means they're not good enough automatically, or you have an A team and a B team and you've I don't want to say scarred the child, but you've really labeled them as someone who's maybe not as skilled as the next. And we realize that that is not our mission in Lansing Parks and Recreation. We want to encompass all people. Which gets me into the community centers and enrichment classes. In 1997, we took over the Lansing School District programs. At that time there was funding issues with federal funding, and over the years the community ed funding at the schools has gone down, as had the adult ed funding. So we worked in partnership with the Lansing School District and took on all of the enrichment classes, the adult enrichment and the youth enrichment, which is all of the swim classes, all the aquatics classes, open swims, and different educational programs at the schools. And there again, that philosophy prevailed too, is that we want to offer something, for everybody. We want to offer ballet classes, but we're not a studio. We don't want to end up in recitals with the investment in the to-dos and the costuming and things like that, but we want the exposure and the gymnastics and the tumbling. There certainly are a lot of private facilities, more so now than ever before. Those private facilities in karate and taekwondo and things for the people who may want to get into the competitive level of that, but we still stay philosophically at the exposure level so that people get a chance, and you can have your kid try out all sorts of little things without having a major investment financially and time-wise. So that kind of carried through in the different programs. Our handicapper rec program, we were one of the early ones in the state to have an outstanding handicapper rec program. We started, when I came in 1975, we had a program for special skiers where we took them over to Cannonsburg, over in Grand Rapids, and ran a special skiing program for those who needed physical assist, adaptive equipment and things for that. It was a huge program, and it's since been taken over by the Grand Rapids area and Cannonsburg, so I think our folks just kind of traverse over there. We offer transportation, a bus to pick up people to go to programs and classes and get some bowling programs and some aquatics programs. And we found over the years that for us to run a transportation system just really wasn't in our best interest, because with maintenance of vehicles and insurance and drivers and cancellations and sign-ups, and there's so many factors, and then there was a special trans section of our local bus company that took care of that. Fenner Nature Center hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. I think it's maybe due to the staffing limitations. As here, they have one staff that's responsible for everything, and she's got quite a number of acres. I don't know if she's up to 44 acres, I think, in the park since the acquisition of the kennel area there. And they run full programs there year-round with their special events, the apple butter and the maple syrup over the years, and then their day camp programs. So that's only changed a little bit. They used to have a half-time support clerical staff there, but that kind of disappeared back in 1992. So they've had, Claire's done an outstanding job in keeping that going forward and acquiring more land and different programs. And she just did, 2 weeks ago, finish the big nature lesson, I think is what they call it, and that's where actual school was held from an elementary school at her facility. So the kids, all 30 whatever of them, 27 of them, came out that day, and the elementary teacher taught them right at the nature center here or there, and then Claire was able to incorporate some science from on site into their day, but they did their math, their English, and their spelling all right there. So that's kind of a new trend that's coming up, is to teach kids in alternative ways, not just in the classroom, but bringing the classroom out to Fenner. The community activities section is one that basically disappeared over the course of the years. We've had our organizational structure is a little bit hard to describe because we've had so many changes over the years. But right now I have supervisors in the lifetime sports, the special recreation, which encompasses the therapeutic recreation and the summer programs and the after-school recreation, Fenner Nature Center and the Turner Dodge House. Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's it. And we had a section that was called community activities back before our the reorganization. We had a major reorganization in 1988, and at that time we lost, in this division particularly, we lost 8 staff. And that was devastating to us because that's basically the time where we had just started doing classes and we had just started really serving more of the particular needs in the public and getting involved in you know, generating some revenues and doing those things. So we lost quite a bit of staff then, and then in 1992 we had an early out program, the retirement program that happened, and we lost like 3 more positions at that point. So we kind of had been the gamut of you know, we had all these staff and these wonderful ideas, and then we've just kind of been paring down, and so now we're at a point where we've got huge ideas and not much staff, where before we had lots of staff and not a lot of ideas. So things have really kind of changed. But our community activities section kind of disappeared at that time, and it got absorbed. 2 supervisors became 1. And in community activities, when I first started with the department, we had 2 people that were specifically responsible for programming in the community. They had volleyball programs, and in their heyday, they were called volleyball clubs. And there was probably, I want to say, 26 or 27 different sites in Lansing that had, mostly ladies, but some were co-ed, volleyball nights. And it was basically a club. It was, the competitiveness wasn't there. One of my first jobs when I was in high school was being the supervisor, the official of one of those. And basically it was like a little, I don't say coffee klatch, but it was just a night to get out, and they put, you know, whoever showed up, they just split up and had 2 teams, and they had assigned somebody to bring snacks, and you know, they just had a real good time once a week, and it was a chance to get out and to get some exercise and those kind of things. Another program that our community activities section did was after school recreation, and we ran after school recreation at up to 15 sites throughout the course of the year, and that was right at the schools, and we would run programs after school, whether it was general recreation or arts and crafts, those kind of things. I also worked in high school in the teen program. We had the schools open in the evenings from 7 to 9 for teen programming, and they basically wanted to play basketball, but you did, you know, a few other things with the kids, and that was kind of like the recreation in Lansing at that time. And over the course of the shrinking of the budgets, and especially in '88, we kind of lost that ability to do that. We didn't program at the schools anymore. And I think as time elapsed, and I haven't really been able to figure out, it would be interesting to me to talk to someone from the schools, but I know as a child growing up, you know, we played basketball Saturdays and nights and everything, you know, I mean, that was where you were central at the schools, through the rec department at the schools. And now it costs an arm and a leg to get into the school on Saturdays because their custodians only work Monday through Friday. And I believe, you know, shrinking budgets on our part probably are mirrored over in the schools, where they had to kind of hone down and get to their mission of what they needed to do, so that the you know, availability of the school facilities wasn't there. We had 100-some parks, we had facilities, and basically the upkeep of the infrastructure was quite a drain on a budget. So they did millage monies. Well, they just decided that got all that money, let's use it for programming. And so we now fund, I believe it's 6 sites through the millage fund, and then community development block grants, which is a federal program that are targeted neighborhoods with percentages of children on free or reduced lunch. They identify those neighborhoods, and those are available. So we have 22 sites right now funded through those 3 sources. So we're up to getting it. And we've always got more requests to have neighborhood programs, you know, in their neighborhoods, but you know, more money, more requests than we have money to fund. But how that's grown over the years is back, you know, when I was younger, you went to the park and they had this wooden shed. It was probably a 5 by 5 foot wooden shed, had a little floor built on it, and I know the trucks used to, I remember the trucks delivering, you know, that, tossing it off the thing, and then they would fill that with an athletic box that had all your softballs and baseballs and your volleyball nets and those things, and then they had arts and crafts box, and they had two staff, a male and a female staff there, and I can remember they wore little blouses, Peter Pan collar blouses and tan shorts. It was quite a, I mean, you think back on it, where we've come these days, and they programmed all day, and I can remember going home for lunch, going home for dinner. So it was a full day program, and they would get out the little plaster cast where they have already casted things, and you pay, you know, 3 cents for a little one and 5 cents for a big one, and they get out the watercolors and you paint that kind of stuff. And we played Nukem. No one plays Nukem these days, where, you know, it's like volleyball that you toss the ball over the net, you catch it instead of hit it back, and tetherball. And there was a lot of competition between the different playgrounds. And I'm assuming, since when I was, you know, working in the parks in the late 70s, when there was 62 at that time, I'm assuming that there was at least, you know, similar amount when I was younger. And we had a huge competition among the different sites. We would always play different playgrounds in sports. We would go play softball from, you know, down back to Berlinden or down back to Comstock, and we would go different places and play, and it was a competitive program. And we also had like a big track and field day, and we had little awards and things. It was like a citywide kind of a thing. It was a big thing, but that's changed a bit. The competition at the playgrounds and things, we don't have that anymore, and I don't know. We don't, like, softball is not big at the playgrounds right now, and the kids bring their, you know, they don't have gloves, or they don't bring them up, or I think a lot of them don't have them, and so, you know, they don't play a lot of softball anymore. Nukem doesn't come up paddle tennis. We still have paddles. I'm sure when I was a kid, those paddles are the same paddles, because they look like they've been chewed and spit out. But we used to, you know, get on a little tennis court, a dirt tennis court, and, you know, play paddle tennis back and forth. And that just doesn't happen these days. And I think that, you know, the trends of just play in general, you know, we have high competition in the summers from air conditioning, from video games, you know, and from television, and those kind of things. And so, you know, we compete, and so we need to get up onto a level. So we do a lot of programming now in our summer playground programs. About 3 years ago, one of our staff developed lesson plans so that they go from activity to activity basically every half hour. Whereas, you know, back in when I was a kid, you know, you just kind of played. I mean, you just kind of did, and one thing evolved into another, and you had scheduled games and things. But so the type of service delivery that we have now in the playground programs has changed dramatically over the years. And I think that with the influx of media, that's probably what our major competition is. Kids, you know, are in summer school right now too, and I imagine they were back then, and, you know, you just kind of made things work, and the playgrounds were open till 8 o'clock. Now we rarely have a playground site that's not at a school, because of the gymnasium facilities, indoor weather. You know, when it rained, you know, I can remember huddling in the little 5x5 shed when it rained, and you know, the porch at the school. A lot of the schools had, you know, porches out the back or pavilions at the parks. But now, with the having gymnasiums and having, you know, to be able to organize the games and to do a lot more with the kids, I think our attendance and things has changed and increased. And of course, depending on the staff that's at the site too, their enthusiasm and their creativity. Our playground program looks a lot different these days than it did back a while ago. Our swim pools, I don't know a lot of the history of the swim pools, except there is a rich history with those, and I know the Morse Park swim pool is a Bin's pool, and there's only like 3 in the nation anymore, and it was built back with the WPC or
Works Progress.
There we go, yeah, that, back in those days. And I remember vividly as a child going there and giving my dime in and getting my key to put my little, my shoes and things in the locker, and then when you bring your key back, you get your dime back, and you go home and or on the way home you stop and get ice cream, that kind of a thing. And our pools are totally free right now, wide open to, you know, anybody and everybody who wants to come. it poses some challenges that way. You know, your maximum that you reach is like 140 people in the pool, and we regularly run shifts because, you know, with only 2 pools, and I don't know if population increases in Lansing, but there certainly is, you know, quite a few more people. So we'll run shifts at the pools and things, but we're working, you know, we need to work on those pools a little bit, because nowadays to have a pool where kids can just come in and basically their entry into the pool, if you will, is for them to recite 3 safety rules so that they are assured that they know, you know, walk, don't run. I mean, any of the 3 that they can do. Take a shower before you enter, and so that's our entry criteria then, is for them to recite 3 rules. But you really don't know who's in your pools right now, and you know, that might have been okay a long time ago, just to have, you know, but there's, you know, issues and things that happen where you want to be able to contact parents, and you want to be able to have some accountability of the children who are there. If you have some misbehaving, you know, and you want to excuse them for the day or whatever, you need to make sure you do a follow-up, and so we have some challenges in that way, and we've thought long and hard about going to a pass system where, you know, they need to have a card to get in. Yet there's quite an investment that would be needed to have the cameras and the ID cards and things. So for now, they're going to be remaining neighborhood pools, but we've been working hard trying to get some spray parks. And I know there's a neighborhood not far from here, Bancroft neighborhood, is trying to fundraise for a spray park, and that's a new trend in the parks, where you've seen like umbrellas that spit water at the kids, and they have buckets that fill with water, and then they dump on the kids. And so it's basically, it's a 0 depth, so it's almost a cement slab with a drain, and they just kind of spray, and it's just a kind of a fun little thing. And so we're looking hopefully to go to that, taking a look at Hunter Park, and going that route there to see if we can do something there. Recently we had a renovation at Moore's Pool. Over the years, of course, we lost the diving board capabilities at any pool because of the national standards of having a 12-foot well for your diving, and the liability that was involved in diving. And I remember the high dive, and white knuckling up the stairs to the high dive when I was a kid, and you just don't see that anymore in the older pools and things, because it was real different. You know, you can't really retrofit our pools. Some pools have been able to do that. But when Moore's had a large renovation, I think it was due to the liner issues and a lot of issues that they had there, they no longer have a deep end. Well, I guess it would be deep to kids, it's like 6 foot. So there wasn't any diving there at all. And then they instituted, they have some little mushrooms that squirt water and some fun little things, so they've kind of come a long ways with that. But back in the olden days, they had the slide that came down and splashed into the water and that kind of a thing. But liability issues have really, you know, dictated a lot of things, you know, rightly or wrongly, and that's a whole topic for another day. When you think liability, I mean, anything you do, you could think liability, and we would be in our own little cocoons if that was the only way we had to think. So, you know, we just try to, you know, to provide what we can for people and make it in the most safe environment. But there, you know, has to be some sort of a understanding of, you know, involvement in different programs. One of the big trends that I wanted to get into too over the years, and I can get into the later trends. Right now, the trends that we're working on are teen programming. There's not a lot for those between the ages of 13 and 15, and 16 and 17 is also included, but some of those kids who are of driving age kind of aren't interested in programming too much. But 13 to 15, 13 to 17-year-olds, and it's very difficult to get them involved in programming. It's based on, nowadays, you know, where their friends go, they go. And we've got teen sites that we operate throughout the city. At our community centers we have, and then we have 4 additional sites. And if we ran only basketball at those centers, we'd be highly popular and no problem numbers, and, you know, keeping kids going. But you take a look at the girls. You know, what do the teenage girls do these days? They watch the boys. I mean, that's basically what they're programming, what they want to do in any of the centers you go to, or whatever. So we've established some programs called Girl Power, and that's when the girls are in the gym solely by themselves. and they're in the game room solely by themselves, because then they're not concerned about who's watching, they're not concerned about how they look, they're not concerned about all those kinds of little teen issues that they, I think, younger and younger get into these days. And so that's a programming avenue, is programming definitely for, for the girls, and to work with them. And yes, you can shoot basketballs, and it doesn't matter that there's who's watching you. You've got those kinds of skills. But teens have a difficult time. Our playground programs aren't really appealing to them. Some of them will come, but when you have a 13-year-old and some 5-year-olds in the same kind of group, it kind of changes the mix and the delivery of how you want to do the services. So our day programs are pretty much for elementary school, and then we try to do the evening programs for the older kids. And we've done programs around food. You do a barbecue for them, and they're right there, no problem. You do basketball, and they're right there. But to get them involved in some other different kind of programs, over the early 90s, there were a lot of service, and there still are a few around, a lot of services of say no to drugs, those kinds of things, and the DARE programs, and the different kind of services, and the Brotherhood Against Drugs with midnight basketball that they brought in. And if you would sit through the hour class for drug resistance, then you could play basketball, kind of a thing. So they teamed recreation with learning kinds of things and educational kind of things, like it was a mandatory kind of thing. And those didn't last too long in our area. It didn't necessarily, the kids, they just didn't come. They weren't interested in doing that. We try every chance we get to bring in some of the services. There's some wonderful programs out there through the health departments and through some private agencies that will bring programs in to try to work with the kids on different issues and educationally and those kind of things. So our teen program is something we really want to concentrate on. And this summer we have a new program. Actually, we started last summer, but it didn't get funded this summer, so we're scaling it down. It's called Volunteen, and it's actually a program that is for 13 to 17-year-olds, and they get a week's worth of training just designated to them, and then we assign them to an actual playground site this summer. So the goals of the program are to get them into job skills, as far as like to interview and to be responsible and to apply and those kind of things, and then have a real responsibility of something that you need to do through the summer, and then successfully completing hours gives them incentives. So that I think the final incentive is going to Cedar Point if they complete a whole lot of hours. So we're trying to bring some responsibilities and those kind of things to the kids, because they need to learn those things earlier and earlier. Another thing that came to light in the last 4 or 5 years is benefits-based marketing, and that's a trend in the National Recreation Park Association movement, and that's to identify the benefits of the service that you're getting, and it's a way to draw people in, and so it basically takes a backward approach to programming. Say for example, this facility, what you would do in your advertising is you would describe the benefits here. Enjoy family time, take a trip back in history, learn how, those kinds of things, rather than, come on to the Turnerdash for a tour. The trend developed, and the ideas behind the trend is that, between 3 and 6, we need to keep our kids busy. That's the time where teenagers get in the most trouble in their own parents' homes. They get in the most trouble because they're, trusted or whatever, or, they're home alone. So instead of just going an after-school program, you market the benefits of, have your kid get involved in physical activity and group games, and be with an adult mentor during the after-school programs. And so you actually market the benefits of a program rather than just say, come on into our after-school program. So that's something where it's a whole new way of thinking. That's like, well, let's just not do a basketball program. Let's do a program that teaches kids how to increase their skills, increase their physical activity, and increase their competence and their self-esteem, their self-confidence in different kind of programs. So we're really trying to work hard on that to try to market it out, and I think that comes too from the competition that we have in the media and the different things that we need to work differently now and to try to draw people in differently. another trend that we went through, and that is still in today, is family-friendly events. If you've ever been to our special events, and I really didn't talk on those too much, but I can. We have our daddy-daughter Valentine dance, and as an example, that one started at the community centers. Foster Center had one, and they filled right up with 50 people, and then Geyer had one, and then Lutz had one, and we decided we would take that down to one major one. We have that down at the Lansing Center. In the past 2 years, we've had 450 people come to our daddy-daughter Valentine dance, becoming so successful we started a mother-son run right on the same night. So because the mothers were jealous that the dads got to go and the mothers didn't. So we have a mother-son dance, and if you would see the interaction between the dads and the daughters, and how we market that is, do you know who your daughter's first date's going to be? Well, let it be you. Have a great time and enjoy, company and enjoy quality time. And I've found that there's a higher, I shouldn't say because I don't know factually, but the influx of dads who are not necessarily around their daughters a lot. I mean, you see that, and you give it a quality experience for them to do that, to enjoy that. It's a canned kind of a thing, and they can have a positive experience and have it all kind of delivered to them. And so we have some family movie nights, and there's some things over at the centers. So family kind of activities is what we need to do, because I think that's what people are realizing more and more, is that the family times are more precious, harder to find with the busy schedules and the different work schedules of people to go through. Special events have changed huge over the years, and I don't know. Sorry. But they have huge. When I started, we had I don't know if you remember the big ethnic festival that was downtown. We started the ethnic festival, and that was started in 1976 with the bicentennial. It was through the city market, all through the whole park, and we did that for a number of years. That was one of my responsibilities, and that was a very interesting project. But and I want to say it died because of lack. With funding and those kinds of things, people wanted to have beer. They wanted to be able to make a quick buck. It was one day, the ethnic festival was on July 4th, and for them to put in hours and hours of work and come away with $300, they were like, it didn't happen. And they wanted to really go into, a larger festival. Riverfest had its day. It went up and up and up, and that was a highly organized, and now Common Ground has replaced it. And we've kept with our 4th of July program, which is going to change a little bit this year, just to allow less organized, less commotion, less, I don't want to say less carnival atmosphere, but more of a family kind of a thing. You can come and bring a blanket, and you can get a popsicle for 50 cents and not, $2 and that kind of a thing to do that. But we've come the gamut in the department from, special events, and we try to be real responsive to the area. So once I get going, I'm sorry, I just don't get stopping. Yeah, I just wanted real quick, just if you want to even take a look afterwards, our brochures. This is our brochure for 1979. This is what we started. And you can take a look at it too, and you can tell it was done by a typewriter. And it's an interesting way to go. We graduated through the years, and we went with the different sizes of brochures that have come through. This was our brochure that we used to do here in Lansing. This is Lansing Parks and Recreation here, and then you go this way and it's Lansing School District. And that's when Community Ed and Parks and Recreation cooperated together. We were both basically in the service delivery business, so theirs were this way and then ours were this way. So we kind of shared brochures. And then we went into the newspaper format, and then we direct inserted into the newspaper in the State Journal. And then I did bring copies of our latest one. This is just hot off the press today, delivered at 4:30, and this is our summer guide for this summer. It's got a list of programs. There's tons of things here there's camps and things at Turner Dodge, and playgrounds and activities. And sorry, I got rolling. Is there any questions or anything?